Hello and welcome to In the Word, your weekday worship guide for reading the scriptures together. My name is Jacob Toman. I'm the lead pastor at Ada Christian Reformed Church, and this week we are taking a look at Exodus chapters 31 through 35 together. One cannot read these chapters without noticing just how much stuff, material stuff, matters to the Lord. You and I are very wealthy people indeed if we can read or listen to this. We have enough food to have multiple meals planned out. We have transportation to get us from one place to another rapidly and with safety. We have heating for our homes in the winter and cooling for our homes in the summer. These are things to be thankful for, that God has provided for us to live in such a time and such a place as we do. God doesn't hate the material world, but God does hate when we attribute to the material world the goodness that comes from God alone. One way we are similar to the ancient Israelites is through a temptation to misuse all the good things we have. The Israelites at the start of Exodus were enslaved in Egypt. By the time we get to chapters 31 through 35, we read about copious amounts of gold, fine linens, jewelry, and tools. Fashioning and furnishing the tabernacle required quite a bit of stuff. God's design for his tent of meeting required quite the list of materials. Much of that stuff came when God won the redemption of his people from Egypt. Back in chapter 12, we read that when the people were readying to leave Egypt, the Israelites did as Moses instructed and asked the Egyptians for articles of silver and gold and for clothing. The Lord had made the Egyptians favorably disposed towards the people, and they gave them what they asked for. So they plundered the Egyptians. That's Exodus 12, 35, and 36. When God redeemed his people, he provided them with a bunch of stuff. This stuff was then repurposed. Instead of being used for the purposes of Egypt, the stuff was then to be used for the glory of God and the blessing of his people. Stuff itself doesn't have a moral identity. There isn't bad stuff or good stuff. Instead, there are ways in which stuff can be used, either for God's glory or for evil. We see this on display in glorious and horrific ways in these chapters. God gave talent and skills to Bezalel, Aholiab, and a host of skilled crafters to make exceptionally beautiful things for the tabernacle. The tabernacle itself was made out of beautiful and rare materials. The Ark of the Covenant, stone tablets, and the rest of the tabernacle accompaniments denoted that these things and the people who had made them had been set apart for special purposes by God. This is partly why these chapters are so striking and important for us to read. On the one hand, these chapters emphasize and underscore the godly use of materials. And on the other hand, these chapters expose the horrendous use we as sinners can use materials for. The same materials that would be prescribed by God for the creation of sacred altars, horns, clasps, rings, and overlays in accordance with God's worship would be used by the Israelites to commit grave sin against God. Rather than following God's instructions for their stuff to be used in the worship of God, the people took creative license to do things their own way. While Moses was on the mountain meeting with God, hearing God's name and witnessing the presence of God, the people, including Moses' own brother Aaron, were busy using materials to worship God in a way they saw fit. Having made an altar in front of the golden calf, Aaron said in Exodus 32:5, "Tomorrow there will be a festival to the Lord." Was gold to blame for the sin of Aaron and the people? Was there something evil in the substance of the materials? Certainly and clearly not. Otherwise, those same materials wouldn't have been apportioned by the Lord for the making of the tabernacle. We learn from these chapters that God sets aside things, stuff, materials, and people for his purposes. When those things and people are used for purposes other than what God has instructed, there is grave offense to God. When God is offended, we see he warns of removing his presence from his people. The beauty, majesty, and glory of the Lord in his near presence among his people would be a blessing unique to God's people alone. While plenty of other people had gold, fine linens, and brilliant ancient architecture, no one else except these redeemed people had the very presence of God dwelling among them. God's presence was a special reality among his people. God's presence was not to be taken for granted. The same is true for us today. We have been set apart if our faith is in Jesus Christ. We have been given the Holy Spirit who indwells us. Our stuff and our personhood has been redeemed for the purposes of the glory of God. Thanks for joining us this week. If you have any questions about anything that we're reading throughout the Bible, you can always send me an email, pastorjacob@adacrc.org. Blessings in your reading this week, and I'll catch you next week.